My name is Sadie Richards, and I'm a research assistant and graduate student in the Environmental Health Department at the BU School of Public Health. I was leading a vermiculture workshop, which is, or was, teaching people how to compost using red wiggler worms, Eisenia fetida, it's the species, in their homes. I first started a worm bin when I moved to Massachusetts. I had been living in sort of rural Vermont and was interested in continuing composting when I moved to the city, and someone told me about worms, and it turned out my neighbor, his father actually had a basement full of worm bins, and he offered to bring one home to me, and it got going from there, and that was about 2 years ago. Probably about 1,000 to 2,000 maybe. The only type of worm I've kept is the Eisenia fetida worms, and they're great. They reproduce really fast, they eat food really quickly, they can eat their own weight in food in a day, and so that makes me happy. For beginning, I would say you want to start with a bin. It could even be just a 5-gallon bucket, or it could be a Rubbermaid bin. As we started with, I think they're like 40 quarts. And you want to drill holes in the sides as well as in the lid because ventilation is important. You want to put paper or leaves, dried leaves, carbon-rich materials into the bin. And that's bedding, although the worms will eat it as well. You then want to start feeding them nitrogen-rich products, mostly rotting vegetables or things of that nature, and you want to start slowly. So I said that worms can eat their weight in food a day. They're pretty neat creatures. They breathe through their skin, which is why they need to be moist and have a moist environment. They don't have teeth. They have gizzards like birds. So they need gritty materials. Eggshells are good to provide that grit so they can digest things. So the worms are eating the food and the bedding, and they're just digesting it and pooping it out. And in the process of doing that, they have microbes in their gut which break down some of the nutrients in that rotting material, and they actually turn it, into compost. And their feces is great and healthy for us to put on our plants that we then are going to consume. Yum! I think that it went well. I think people came excited to learn more. I heard from several people that they'd always thought about keeping worms, but had just never had the impetus to get the bin going themselves. And that was the case with me. I was thinking about it for nearly a year before I actually got a bin. The generational aspect was wonderful. Like, kids really enjoy getting their hands dirty and checking out the wildlife, because it's not just worms that survive in the bin and break things down. You have this whole host of symbiotic creatures that are necessary in the compost bin, and it's this little microcosm of life where you have the little springtails, these little white things that look like fleas that are helping to break down the vegetable matter, and then the worms are eating the fungus that grows on that, as well as the rotting food. So it's, yeah, it's good stuff. We had been keeping worms for almost a year when we got married last fall, and we took some of our finished compost and we brought it with us up to Vermont where we got married, and actually used it to amend the soil in which we transplanted a thyme plant. And that was meaningful for us and brought our worms into the ceremony in a creative way. The lady at the post office when my worms came in was very disgusted, to say the least. They were quarantined when they arrived, so I gave her the 30-second spiel about how if we let worms into our life, they actually can quite unobtrusively turn our trash into gold. So maybe someday she'll come around.